Morning, everybody.
Morning.
It's really good to see your smiling eyes. If you don't mind, I'm going to go, since I'm a good 6-10 feet away from you, I'm going to go ahead and take my mask off. For those of you who I have not met, my name is Glen Villanueva, and I'm the president and CEO of Modesto Christian School Board, and have been since, 5 years now, 4.5 years, something like that. And my day job is I'm a family physician, and I oversee 6 health centers across Merced and Stanislaus County, and we see about 80,000 patient visits a year. So it's pretty large volume, and so we've had some experience with COVID, right? And COVID is a really interesting time for all of us, and it has caused a lot of concern, has caused a lot of misinformation, and it's caused a lot of truths and half-truths. And so as we kind of get started back to school together, right, it's good to see all of your smiling faces, but it's also good for you to hear a few reminders. So many of you read the news, watch the news, listen to podcasts, and you guys understand how important and serious and prevalent. And I'm not here to discuss or argue or debate how real or not real COVID is. I'm here to kind of share with you kind of some facts as well as observational kinds of comments that I've had over the last 7 months now leading a healthcare organization in COVID-19. First and foremost, I want you all to know that the gamut of COVID as it affects any individual is quite broad. You have folks that feel completely fine, have no idea they have anything, and you have folks that are in the ICU on ventilators, right? And so many of you know folks yourself, maybe you yourself or family members have had COVID, and more or less you felt like you had kind of a cold or a scratchy throat and you felt fine. Others of you have had to go to the emergency room or know people who have had to do that, and others have had folks, loved ones, go to the hospital to be hospitalized, or even worse, some of you may have even experienced loved ones who have died from it. By a show of hands, how many of you have had impact by COVID in your own personal life, family life, or friends? Does anybody know anybody with COVID? Yeah, I think pretty much most of us, right? And so when I look at it, that gamut makes us all think, well, it's not that bad or it's horrible. It's neither nothing and everyone's going to die from it, right? It's neither of those things. And so one of the things I want to kind of talk with you about, you all know what the symptoms are, right? Anyone have any questions about the symptoms? They're very much like any other virus, which is the problem, right? There's sore throat, there's runny nose, there's cough, there's scratchy throat, and there's also some GI upset, there's loss of taste and smell. Lots of those things can be with sinus infections, allergies, can be with other viruses, strep throat, which is why it gets kind of confusing. So especially this season, I don't know how you all feel about the flu shot. Some of you folks are tried and true. I've never gotten the flu shot in my entire life, and I've never gotten the flu, and I never will, and I'm never going to get the flu shot. I would encourage you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that if you're going to do it any particular year, getting a flu shot this year is super, super important, and here's the reason. Because what that does, it minimizes the confusion about what you might have, okay? It doesn't completely reduce your risk of COVID. It doesn't completely reduce and get rid of your risk of having the flu. But what it does do is it helps the healthcare professionals who are caring for you to have confidence that, hey, your symptoms, while it sounds kind of like the flu, listen, you got the flu shot in October, right? If you got the flu shot in October, the likelihood of you having flu is much less. So that makes it more likely that you might have COVID. Right? So that's something to kind of think about. The other thing to think about is during a pandemic, and this is really important, and I want to drill down on this one super hard with you guys, is there's no such thing as a cold during a pandemic. Okay? You don't have a cold. Assume you have COVID, please. For the sake of your loved ones, for the sake of your colleagues, for the sake of the school community, there's no such thing as a cold during a pandemic. Period. There's not. I tell my entire staff, we have 180 employees where I work, and I tell them all, listen, there's no such thing as a cold during a pandemic. And that's really important because we think to ourselves, well, it's not going to affect me. I'm fine. It's fine. It's okay. It's no big deal. my spouse is fine. You can go to work. It's okay, right? The problem with that is it can still spread when you feel fine, right? And you just have a scratchy throat, or you have a little bitty tiny cough, or, a scratchy kind of, I just don't feel great, but, I haven't missed work in 7 years, so I'll just go to work. I was kind of thinking about this on the way to work, or to here, actually. And in my entire medical career, I've missed work for sickness 3 times. Each of those 3 times in the last nearly 30 years is because I was hospitalized. And so I'm really paying attention to, how do I feel, what's going on, and I really want to encourage you all that is something that's really important to kind of think about. Because it's not just how you feel, it's also how inadvertently these things spread to other folks, right? You all are doing a great job with wearing masks, and you all know about social distancing. There really is not a magic number of feet we need to stay away from each other. People get this in their head that it has to be 6 feet, and I'm completely 100% safe. That's actually, it's a rule of thumb. What it means is really some space and some distance, physical distance, to kind of prevent the droplet spread in communication, right? And so it could be 5.5 feet, it could be 10 feet, but just some distance, right? One of the things we do with contact tracing internally, as well as from the public health standpoint, is a rule of thumb is your highest risk is if you have been within 6 feet for greater than 15 minutes at one time without masks. That puts you at the highest risk for transmission or receiving or getting ill. But what's interesting is you may or may not have been reading the CDC updated that last week. Before it was just within 15 minutes or in 15 minutes time, or greater than 15 minutes time, I should say, all at one time. CDC has revised that to say greater than 15 minutes within a 24-hour period. They've done some studies, particularly with prison guards who are masked and the inmates who are masked, that they had multiple 1 to 3 to 4 minute contacts with a person over a 24-hour period, and the prison guard tested positive after having been working in a COVID unit, who were with inmates that were just being screened. So that's certainly something to kind of consider, all right? So it's not just one time, it's kind of the cumulative time. I haven't actually seen that yet because that recommendation just came out. That recommendation came out last week, and I'm just giving you the absolute most current guideline. So I've not personally seen that in any of my employees. I've not seen it in our patient population yet. We've not seen that with our internal contact tracing yet. But that is something I think that is probably kind of out there. And so we'll be seeing that, and we'll be kind of monitoring what that looks like and how that impacts us. And then, as we think through this time, one last thing that's also really important. And I say it's really important because you all are educators, and 2 of the most difficult fields to be in right now are healthcare and education. Because of a number of issues, because of the number of concerns that are raised in a school environment, as well as in healthcare. Okay? Those are 2 really difficult fields right now. COVID has obviously impacted every field, but those 2 seem to be pretty intensely impacted. And one of the concerns is, how is it spread in a campus, okay? And one of the things that I want to kind of talk to you about is there have been a number of other countries that have reinstituted K through 12 learning and have not seen an increase in cases among the student population. Both in studies as well as what we're seeing nationally, and what I'm personally seeing anecdotally is this. COVID is entering our school systems not through the students. It's coming in through me and you. Okay, it's coming in through the adults. It's coming in through faculty and staff. It's coming in through parents. It's coming in through visitors. That's where it's coming in from. It's not coming from our precious little 7 and 8-year-olds, okay, or our 10-year-olds or our 4-year-olds. We haven't had any of the high school students so much on campus in kind of the same volume, but it will increase the risk the older they get, because they get closer to being an adult. That kind of just naturally follows. So here's the thought that I have for you all. We can do everything right with social distancing, wearing our masks, really monitoring our symptoms, doing our daily health app, which I think are all fantastic and is really helping to protect our campus, protecting you, protecting our community. But where we can find some creep into that wall of protection is when you and I go home and you and I do stuff on Friday night and Sunday and Saturday, and we want to go to have some normal experiences with family and friends, and I'm right there with you. But we have to be cautious. We have to be aware. I am not saying whatsoever, don't go to that family gathering. Okay? Don't hear me say that, and I'm glad I'm on camera because I'm not saying that. I'm not saying don't go to that wedding. I'm not saying don't go to that important family gathering for your father who's 80 years old. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying is, please be aware of your surroundings, wherever it is you are, whenever it is you are there, because what we do from 5 p.m. to the following morning, as well as on Saturday and Sunday, immensely impact our ability to stay in school, our ability to educate, to teach, and then ultimately impact these children and these families for Christ, which is the reason we're here, right? It's the reason I'm here, with Modesto Christian School. That's the reason. And so I want that to continue as seamlessly as possible, and I don't want to have to make a really crummy, hard decision like I did 11 days ago with the rest of the board and with Mrs. Jewell and Vicki and Greg and all the rest to say, listen, we probably need to shut down. Here's one last thing, and I keep saying one last thing because there's always another last thing, is that for whatever reason, and I'm not entirely actually sure why it is, but the return to work guidelines for the Centers for Disease Control as well as Stanislaus County Public Health have 10 days. 10 days from onset of symptoms. Your symptoms are improving, and the last 24 hours before you return to work, you have no fever objectively, and you don't use Tylenol or ibuprofen to reduce the fever. So it's not from the time that you were tested, but it's the time of onset of symptoms. That's the return to work guidelines for every other kind of job there is. Education, California Department of Public Health and Public Education seems to have 14 days as that kind of time frame. I'm not entirely clear why that difference is, why I can go back to the hospital or to a clinic and work after 10 days if I'm improved, but if I'm an educator, I wouldn't be able to until 14 days. And I think probably what's happening is there's just an extra measure of caution, and that's kind of what they seem to be leaning on, even though I've not seen that in writing. So if you see on websites or the CDC or news that, hey, it should be 10 days, you're actually right. It should be 10 days. But out of an abundance of caution, I think what most school districts are doing is going with kind of on the 14-day mark. And so those are the kind of things that we're looking at. Having said all of that, I wanted to say on behalf of the board how much we appreciate you, right? I haven't had an opportunity to stand before you all like I normally do a couple times every semester, and this really is the first time I've had a chance to do that. And I can't speak highly enough of what the board feels about what you are doing, your commitment to these students, the commitment to the school, the commitment to these families. It's an amazing thing for me to hear from our administrators how on the elementary school side we have 40, 50, 60 new families and students. There's a reason for that, right? There's no reason during a pandemic that Modesto Christian School should have an increase in enrollment on the elementary side. There's absolutely no reason for that, other than it's God doing something really cool. And so the impact that you and I can have to keep this ship moving down the river is so that we can continue to have that input into these lives. We can continue to have that impact into these families that otherwise may not ever have heard or seen or experienced the love of Jesus. And your commitment to doing that is something that no amount of money or paycheck that we could possibly ever give you would be enough thanks. And so I thank you as a school board member, as well as the father of 2 graduates from Modesto Christian School. My oldest graduated 2 years ago. She's now a junior in university, and my youngest is a freshman. And so They spent their entire educational career here since both of them were age 3. And so this is important to me. And it's important for me to share with you how much I thank you for what you do. So with that, do any of you have any questions that I might be able to answer from either a board standpoint or from a physician standpoint, something, a burning question or confusion or something that you might need some help kind of thinking through? Yes.
I know.
Yeah, I thought that was you. It's nice to see you. Yeah, I
So you
recognize.
said there's no such thing as a cold, but if you get tested and it is negative.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. A couple of things. One, if you test negative, you may come to work, okay? All other things being equal though, you still are wearing a mask, you're still washing your hands, you're still using hand sanitizer, you're still maintaining social distance. Because if there's one thing I recognize, at least during this pandemic, is I've never seen so many clean hands in my life. and as a physician, I love that. I love that we're aware of spreading germs, because this is only going to benefit us, you know, for flu season and RSV season if you have little kiddos, and if you're around older folks and viral pneumonia and all of that. Just that's important. If you test negative but you still have a scratchy throat, as long as, most importantly, you don't have an objective fever. Okay? If you don't actually have a fever. And if you don't have a thermometer yet, please get one. It's nothing, it's $3 maybe, $5, $4, but it's super important because more often than not, people will say things like, I don't have a fever, I feel fine. Did you check it? Well, no, I don't need to, right? That doesn't help. Just check it. I check my temperature every day. I've got a thermometer in the trunk of my car. So I check it every day before I walk into the office. I text our triage nurse and say, hey, listen, I'm good. And they're like, okay, cool. You can come into the building. You all doing those daily health apps is reassuring yourself that you're safe to come into the workplace. You're reassuring the families that you're safe to come teach their students. And you're reassuring your colleagues, right, that's the case. And it's not gonna be perfect. There's gonna be some things that kind of slip through, but listen, everyone's doing their absolute best. And please just continue to do that. And I wanna be the biggest cheerleader and say, yeah, go for it, do it. You can do this, we can do this. But we still have to kind of pay attention to these little details, right? And so if you have a scratchy throat, you feel kind of crummy, you don't feel great, as inconvenient, as weird as it may seem, because you haven't called in sick in forever, please don't come into work until we have greater confidence that you're fine. And then come on into work, no problem. All right? Any other questions? Thank you for that, Alexa.
What is the temperature
Yeah, doctors really can't seem to agree on a fever. 100.5.
Our little thermometers, the guns,
Mhm.
they turn yellow if it's 99 or above, and then they turn red once it hits 100.4.
Okay, perfect, yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, when they say greater than 100.4,
Then
you know,
that's
whether it's
a
100.4 or 100.5, listen, if you're at 100.3, stay home.
It's a fever.
You know, just stay home. It's good technology, but it's not exact and completely 100% imprecise, right? So let's just kind of use our wisdom and caution. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Hypothetical question.
I love these. Okay, hypothetical.
Okay, so for Thanksgiving, for example, I'm going to Idaho where it's like 50 degrees colder than it is here.
Hypothetically, right?
Well, no, I know it is because but when we come back, I noticed I just went to Idaho and came back with congestion and stuff because the elevation change and the temperature change. Is that 14 days ago?
Good job, coach.
So if we come back from there with, say, same thing, congestion, just because the temperature change, the elevation change, do I just need to let the office know, or how do you want us to proceed when we have those vast changes?
Sure.
In
It's going to be a case-by-case basis, but I would encourage you to stay home. Okay, just so
like
we're
the first
consistent,
day
right?
Okay.
Because, well, I just traveled to Colorado, or I traveled to Texas, or wherever I went for Thanksgiving, and I come back, and, well, I'm kind of travel fatigued.
Okay.
Well, travel fatigue could also mean that I got COVID on the plane, right? Or I caught it when I was having Thanksgiving dinner with my 2 teen-aged daughters. So that's what I would encourage.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Now is a good time for you to review the safe school reopening plan. I took a few minutes the other day and was reminded of some things, so those are board approved, waiver approved, review that document.
One other thing is that obviously all of the recommendations from the CDC, Department of Public Health, Public Education are always kind of changing. And that, for some of you who love stability, which, you know, are some of us, if not many of us, and we want consistency, that's kind of hard right now. And I'd be really honest and just say that's kind of impossible. So what was true last week from a healthcare standpoint is actually not true today, even for me, right? I just shared with you everything I'd been doing up until last week, what the guidelines were, and last Wednesday or Thursday, CDC comes out and says, you know what, Dr. Villanueva, it's actually something else. Okay. So it's gonna constantly be changing, and our ability to adapt, be flexible, and be incredibly patient and gracious with each other is super important, right? And so I appreciate that in you all, and the grace that you've extended to your colleagues, to the students, to their families, and your ability to just kind of adapt. So thank you for that, and I hope you have a great year, and I apologize horribly for not being able to come before you sooner. But I don't know, there's been a thing or two happening, right? All right, thank you all, have a good day.
Thank you.